service. So one example I showed you how we can work with Angular service. So Angular service, two important points are there. One is a provider, another one injector. And we learned that provider can be configured at two levels. Provider at application level in app module and provider at the service level, right, provided in. Now today, yesterday what example I showed you, I will just give you that. So what we done is, we created a new folder. So by name what? Services. In that we added a new file. So the file name we given as capture.service.ts, and in that we created one service method, and basic rules of service already I told you. This is one service method called generate code, which is used for generating a random code and returning the code. Now this service we want to use in a component. Then what we have done, register.component.ts. In this we have to inject the service. We have to inject the service into the constructor. We are injecting the service. What is the role of this? It implements singleton. That means at the time of creating component, it will create the service object, and it will be available across any number of requests. And we are declaring a local variable property. Into that we are generating the code and displaying, right? This is just injecting the service. And we are implementing register.component.html. In this we are presenting this code. So whenever you refresh, a new code will be generated. This already I explained in the last session. One more example we will see how to work with service, right? Another example we will see. Now another example, we will see how to use Angular HTTP client service. But how to work with Angular HTTP client service. Actually, the main purpose of HTTP client service provides a set of properties and methods that are used to communicate with the API. To communicate with API, get the data from API, interact with API. So we can use this HTTP client service. Now, in many interviews, they may ask the question like, already you are doing that with fetch. We were communicating with API, getting the data and displaying already through fetch. We are doing it. So now the question here is, what is difference between fetch and we have $Ajax. This belongs to jQuery. And what is difference between the HTTP client and the HTTP client? That means all these three are used for communicating with API, getting the data from API, sending the data to API. All API requests we can manage by using these three. Then what is difference between them? In JavaScript level, you will learn with fetch. In jQuery, you will learn Ajax, and in Angular, we can use HTTP client. What is difference is actually fetch actually it returns data in binary form. Fetch actually returns data in binary form. What we have to do is convert to JSON. And Ajax directly returns data in JSON. Ajax directly returns data in JSON form. And we have HTTP client. HTTP client also returns in JSON form, but in addition to that, it can handle CORS issues, cross-origin resource sharing issues. Because if you have worked with APIs, every time we will face the issues with CORS. That means if data is coming from cross-origin, then our application will block the request. So it can handle the CORS at the client level. At client level, CORS can be managed. So these CORS issues, I will tell you one more. Our own API we will create. We will see that. Now, technically, another important is it can handle exceptions with HTTP requests. It can easily track the issues. Easily tracking the issues means it can identify where the problem occurred. That means is API not responding? Is API path wrong? It have built-in exception handling. Actually, we have to write additional exceptions for identifying the problems when you are working with Ajax. But this can handle the exceptions with HTTP requests easily. It can track and it can identify. Not only that, actually it supports piping. Pipe advantage is this is a different one. That means this pipe is different. Actually, it supports pipe which can handle asynchronous requests. It can handle asynchronous requests. Pipes allows to handle asynchronous requests. Asynchronous request means without blocking other requests, they can process the current request. Actually, it takes help of, that means it uses async library called RxJS. It uses a async library called RxJS. Actually, RxJS is a reactive extension of JavaScript library. It is not related to Angular. Generally, people come to Angular without knowledge of all JavaScript. Then they think that all these are part of Angular. And usually they ask, many times people ask, will you teach RxJS in Angular? Why should I teach RxJS in Angular? It is not a part of Angular. It is a general JavaScript library. It is a general JavaScript library you can use in any JavaScript applications. That means it is not a part of Angular. So it is an ordinary JavaScript library you can use in any JavaScript application. Many people don't know that. They don't have idea of RxJS. They don't know that it can be used in JavaScript applications. But they come and learn Angular. In Angular, it is already installed along with Angular. They think that it is a part of Angular. RxJS, it is not part of Angular. That means it is not a Angular related library. It is an ordinary JavaScript library which is used for handling asynchronous requests. So any JavaScript people working with JavaScript applications can use this RxJS. It is a general library. So you see RxJS is a general library. This is the RxJS general library. So it is a library for JavaScript. It is not related to Angular or React or any technology. Any technology which is using JavaScript, it can use this library. For which purpose? It is used for handling asynchronous requests. That means it allows you to configure and handle asynchronous requests. By using this RxJS, we can create asynchronous requests. So this is not a concept of Angular, it is a concept of JavaScript. Just like JavaScript have jQuery library, it also have RxJS library, it also have Redux library. All these are JavaScript based libraries. So what is advantage is HTTP client can use this asynchronous library so that you can handle the requests in a more better way. It improves the performance actually. So fetch cannot do that. Fetch cannot do that. Ajax implicitly does certain actions, but Ajax requires explicitly handling the exceptions, explicitly handling the promises. So, but HTTP client internally have everything. So you can use fetch. We haven't used this up to now, but we worked with APIs. We can even use this jQuery Ajax also, but not required. We have a special library here, HTTP client. So we will see how this HTTP client service can handle the request. Remember, HTTP client is a service. It is a service means yesterday we created a service. Similar to that, it is an existing service which is already built in. And you have to inject this service and use for communicating with the APIs. Let's see how we can do that. To use this, now we need to create one important HTTP client service is configured in HTTP client module. It is configured in HTTP client module of which library? It is having the library angular/common./HTTP. It is a member of this library. That means we have HTTP service. It is configured in HTTP client module, which is a member of this Angular HTTP, common HTTP. So in order to use this service, you have to first import this module into your application. So what you have to do, go to app.module.ts and here we have to import this module. In order to use this in your project, once you import, you can use in any component, right? Now we have to go to the app module. So let's go to the app module. In the app module, we have to import. So here, import HTTP client module, client module. So from, so it is @Angular common HTTP. From Angular common HTTP, we have to import it. So we have to import from Angular common HTTP and we have to register the module in imports. Here we have to register HTTP client module. Okay. Now it is ready to use. So we have to first import, and in imports we need to configure this. In imports already other modules will be there, HTTP client module. We need to define this HTTP client module in app module. Now this is the HTTP client module. It is ready. Now I want to use this to communicate. Usually you can use in every component. individually we can use this in every component, but we don't want to use this in every component. So means in every component individually we don't want, we want to reuse it. Then what we do is we will follow a simple technique then. Like yesterday, what we do is we will create a service. That means what we will do here, we will create a data service. In this service, we will use HTTP client, and through HTTP client, we will handle the requests. That means get methods, post method, put method, delete methods, all these we will configure here. Now, what we do is we have so many components. So we have so many components. In every component, I need data. Then in every component, just we need to inject this service and use it. That means now we will create one data service. The data service will use HTTP client to communicate with the backend APIs. That means we have backend API. That means later I will show our own database. So currently it will communicate with some ready-made APIs if anything is there. It will get the data from the APIs and it will send to the component. That means you have component like suppose we have products component, we have some categories component. In every component we need data. Then in every component we don't need to write the methods for fetching. You have to just inject this service and use it. What is advantage of service? It will provide a reusable predefined business logic. Service is a predefined business logic. It is a reusable predefined business logic. We can inject into any component and we can use it. Now, previously what we have done, so many examples, see, in so many examples we worked with data. Whenever we worked with the data, everywhere we have to write this complete logic of fetch. Now, if I want in another component to fetch, again I have to write it. Again I have to write it. So we are not doing that now. Let's see how to handle now. So now what we have to do is we have to create a service. So create a new service for communication with the API. Create a new service for communication with API. And this time you can create a service using command ng generate service name. Any name you can give. I told you manually adding and through command, both we are saying. Previous example I showed manually we added a file and we need to import injectable and we need to import provider, and you have to tell provided in root or platform or any, right? So we have to handle everything manually. Now it will generate everything for us. Just so see now, go to services, open in terminal. Services is opened in terminal. Here what is the command? Ng generate service. S is shortcut. You can just use service. Service name is data. I will give the service name as data, skip test. Now you can see a service is created by name data. Okay, you can see same like capture service, data service is created. And when you open it, already it is having the same code what we written yesterday. There is nothing special, right? So you can manually add it or you can run through commands, right? Now here we need two extra libraries here. One is to communicate with API, we have to import HTTP client. HTTP client is a class. So this HTTP client class provides all the options for interacting with HTTP requests. Get, post, put, delete, everything you can manage by using HTTP client. One more we need here. To manage the requests in an asynchronous way, if you don't manage in an asynchronous way, whenever you make a request, all other actions are blocked in the application. We don't want all other actions to block. We want the request to work along with other requests. In that case, we have to import an observable using RxJS. We have to import an observable from RxJS. Actually, this is not something very new for you. Already where you heard this word observable or observer, I told you already. Subscriber, observer, have you heard that? Already we discussed, right? We heard about the words like observer, subscriber. In which concept? We discussed this in the concept of events. Remember the events? We discussed that event follows a software design pattern called observer. Now, event uses an observer, subscriber, right? Observer is a design pattern. We learned that in the observer pattern. We discussed that in that. Actually, I told you when we discussed about events that suppose we write some insert click, right? Insert click. So insert click and on button click. So we are pointing towards that insert click. I told you that it is a delegate function pointer. So I told you the definition of event. Event is a message sent by sender to its subscriber in order to notify the change. That means here, this is whom, this is sender. This is the sender. And this is the subscriber. This is the subscriber. Sender and the subscriber. Sender sends a notification to the subscriber. And what subscriber will do? It will perform this functionality. Right? Event follows this mechanism. Actually, in the same concept, actually, we have, means while working with RxJS have two important things. One is observable. Another one is subscriber. These two are basically enough. Observable is nothing but, same like observable, it is nothing but it defines actions to perform. It defines actions to perform. What actions to perform? So it is defined by observable. That means observable contains actions to perform. What actions we have to perform? That is defined by observable. And subscriber defines when to perform. Subscriber defines the actions when to perform. So that means actions to perform. So actions are defined through observable. Those actions are executed through subscriber. Actions are defined by observable and actions are executed by subscriber. That means RxJS uses two important options. That means, so we have to create this service and we have to import following libraries. One is you have to import this one, that is HTTP client, and you have to import RxJS. You have to import these two, right? Now, here I will give complete example. I will give here. I will explain here. HTTP client. It is a class. It is a class required for handling HTTP requests. It is a class required for handling HTTP requests like get, like post, like put, like delete. All these actions are handled by using this HTTP client. And observable is RxJS library. It is RxJS library that defines actions to perform. That defines actions to perform using async methods. What actions to perform with async methods that are defined by using observable. You have another option, subscriber. Subscriber will be there. It is RxJS library that executes the async methods. Async methods are configured with observable. Async methods are executed by using subscriber. So what is the role of observable? It will define what actions to perform. What is the role of subscriber? It defines when those actions need to execute. So executing the actions is managed by subscriber, and defining the actions is done by observable. These are the two important RxJS related libraries. Now let's see how to handle this. So we will go here. Now here very important is, what is HTTP client? HTTP client is a service. It is a service. Then how to access the members of service? If it is a service, then we inject this service into our service. Into service, another service. This is our own service, data service. This HTTP client is a ready-made service, predefined service. You can use a service in service, right? And this service, if you want to use in your service, you have to inject that also. Every service should be injected into any component or into any service. Now, if you want to inject, you know the mechanism. We have to create a private HTTP of what type? HTTP client. This is very frequently asked in interviews at fresher and experience level, that why you have to define in constructor. That means many times they ask like, why don't you create an object directly? That means you create public HTTP of what type? HTTP client type. Why don't you create it directly? Why don't you create it directly? Or HTTP is equal to new HTTP client. Why don't you create directly? We cannot use this because it uses a singleton pattern. If it is using a singleton pattern, object cannot be created every time. Object can be created only once. And when that object must be created while creating this service, that means you have to define that in which location? In the constructor. Why to give private? If I don't define private, it is not accessible to class. Because you see, you written in a constructor as a parameter, then it is accessible only in the constructor. Right? It is accessible only in the constructor. For example, see, I have a method get categories. That is one method. I have another method get products. This is another method. Now I am not marking it as private. I am giving just HTTP. Now it is a parameter of this constructor. It is not accessible outside this constructor. It is not accessible outside the constructor. You try here, HTTP, it is accessible here. You can use get, put, delete, all these methods you can define. It is accessible here. But if you try to use that HTTP here, so you see HTTP, it is not available here. I will access through this .http, not available here, because it is declared inside a constructor. So it is accessible only within the scope of constructor. If you mark it as private, then it makes it available to the class. It will makes available to the class. Then you can access from any location. Otherwise, it is accessible only in the constructor. That means any parameter that you configured in a constructor is accessible only in the constructor. If you want it to accessible across the class, then you have to make it public, private, or protected. You can use public also, no matter. That means you can define public. This is also available. But problem with public, it is accessible to all outside. We don't want that. We want to access only inside. That is the reason we have to mark this as a private. Many people use this without knowing the purpose of this, why they are writing in a constructor, right? That is the reason you should know why it is written in a constructor, right? Because it represents singleton mechanism, singleton. Okay. Now, what should happen? Through this HTTP, we created two service methods. Now our data service contains two methods. One is categories, another one products. I want categories to get all the categories from, suppose we have fake store API from there. Later we will create our own API. Currently we will see ready-made APIs, right? So now here products will get all the products and it should return the products. But very important, these methods should execute along with other methods. So first I am writing here what they have to return. I am writing simply like this. This should return, it should return HTTP, this dot HTTP dot get. Through get method, we are requesting HTTP colon fake store API.com slash what is it products slash categories. So it is going to return all the products categories. That's it. That means what it will do is this HTTP will fetch the data coming from here and return in a JSON form. When we are using fetch, you have saw that, right? Fetch returns, fetch requires promises. Fetch is itself a promise, and fetch uses then for converting data into JSON, another then for returning the JSON data. But here simple, get, and it will get the data from here and it returns. But now the problem is, here the problem is when this method is being executed, it will not allow other methods to perform. It will not allow other actions to perform. Then we have to make this method execute in an asynchronous way. Then we have to define the type as observable. We have to define as observable. We have to use observable. Observable. What this observable can do is, it can execute this method. It can execute this method along with other methods. Along with other methods. But observable must tell what type of data it is going to return. That means observable is used as a type now. Observable is used as a type here. If it is used as a type, it should tell what type of data it should return. That means it will execute this method asynchronously and returns data. What type of data it is going to return? Now tell me what is the result of this API. The result of this API is a string array na? Categories now. It is a string array. Then we should define this type generic as a string array type. because observable is generic, because it can handle any type of data, employees data, string data, JSON, any kind of data it can handle. That means now it is saying that I will execute this method along with other methods and I will return what type data? String. In that case, this get method also should return the same. That means you said observable have to return this string type, then get also should be same type. Already get is returning the same type, but observable don't know that. That is the reason this get also should be generic. What type of data it should return? String type array. String type array. That means now this get indicates that I am returning a string array. Observable will return that string array through this method in an asynchronous way. Actually, without these observables, we have to write lot of JavaScript async methods, async, await like methods. But we don't need to write that if we are using RxJS. If we are using RxJS, we can simply, if we are using RxJS, you see, it is showing that the point is, you see, a representation of set of values over any amount of time. What is meant by amount of time? Amount of time means according to the request. So what is necessary, only that is delivered. That means it is not returning everything. That means it implements the mechanism of lazy loading. It will use asynchronous, it use lazy loading, implicitly it will handle. We don't need to manually write anything. We don't need to manually configure anything. Just we have to use a ready-made library. That means why RxJS is very much used. Without RxJS also we done. Without RxJS we used fetch method, we communicated with API. But this makes the performance better. Why? Because it will not block the other requests when it is handling the requests from the APIs. Same thing, now we have to write for products. What should be the products? It should be what type? Observable type. What type of data it is returning? It is returning what type of data? Any type of array, because product contains lot of details, right? Later we can tell strongly what have to return. Suppose if you created your own API, you can tell exactly what to return also. That means you can tell product type, you can tell some category type, exactly what type of data to return. That means we can define contracts and we can use those contracts. I will show you. For that we need our own APIs. If we create our own APIs, then we can do that. And to create your own APIs, you need knowledge of database, server-side technologies. I will give an overview, right? So here, currently what is get products? It is returning any type array. So what it should return? This dot http dot get what type? Any type array. And what is the request? http://fakestore.api.com/what products. That's what we are doing. This is the service methods how we configure. What is difference between the previous and now is, previously we were using fetch. Fetch will return data in binary. We need to convert into JSON, right? And it is using a blocking technique. It will not execute along with other tasks. Now it has to execute along with others because it is using an async library, observable. Now everything ready. That means we have a service called data service, and in this data service we have injected HTTP client. Through that we are communicating with the APIs. So we have two service methods. One is get categories and get products. Now let's go here, and I want to use it. So you create a new component. Let's create a new component. Let's add a new component. So ng generate component API demo. Okay. Skip test. Okay. I am creating a component API demo, and let's make this component in the startup. That means here we are defining API demo. Okay, in index I will keep that API demo. So this API demo is in the API demo. Okay. Now here let's run this and see API demo is working fine. This is API demo working fine. Now let's go to API demo. In the components API demo in the TS, here I want to use the data. Here I want to use the data coming from API. In any component now you want to work with the data, then you can just inject the data service. You don't need to again create all those methods and configure them. Just inject that service here. So what is the service? Let's go to the constructor. You know how to inject service, yesterday I told you. So private, it is data. It is of what type? Data service. Data service, and it is imported automatically here from our services. Now very simple. Now this data service contains two methods: get categories, get products. So we need to collect the data. So we need one categories array, which is what type? String type array. Another is a products array, which is any type. So that is the array. Now what we have to do is, on initialization, when component initializes, we need to access this dot data. Through data we have to execute which method? Get categories. Now very important, it is not an ordinary method, it is an asynchronous method. How asynchronous method are executed? Asynchronous methods are executed by subscriber, right? The actions are defined by observable. These actions are executed by subscriber. So we need a subscribe method. We need a subscribe. That means this is going to execute this method. After executing, subscribe is an iterator. It will execute and it will read every data coming from it. That means it's an iterator. Iterator means parenthesis. You have to call a parameter. You need to define a parameter which will collect every record. That means we will define data, or you can simply put as category. That means it will read every category. After that, it should apply to which one? This dot categories is equal to whatever the category is there. Am I right? That's it. That means actually this is a callback function. Callback function we are writing through an arrow technique, right? Callback function means, how do we write? We write as a function. What this function have to do? It should read every category returning by this subscribe method. What subscribe method will do? It iterator. That means it will read every record returned by this method, and it will store that record in category. This we need to apply to which one? This dot categories. Into that we need to apply that category. That's how we define, right? But we don't use this as this technique here, right? Generally what